Who are you and what are you hiding?
I'm nobody. Just here to survive.
Where did you learn to fight like that?
Just pick things up along the way. We finish as one! No one gets left behind!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel. Imagine arriving at a place where nobody knows your name, your past is a mystery, and every eye watches your every move, wondering if you really belong. This is the story of Riley Morgan, a young woman who walks alone through the gates of Camp Rockford, her secrets hidden deeper than anyone suspects. She faces suspicion, rivalry, and cold stares, but Riley's strength isn't just in her skills, it's in her ability to never give up, even when nobody believes in her. During the harshest training, one moment changes everything. Brandon Keller, her toughest rival, corners her and demands, "Who are you really, Riley?" She just looks him in the eye and answers, "I'm nobody. Just here to survive." But the truth is never that simple. Soon, the only way forward is together. When Riley risks everything for her team in the toughest field challenge, hauling her friends through mud, leading them past every obstacle, and refusing to leave anyone behind, their trust is finally earned. We finish as one. No one gets left behind. Riley shouts, her voice echoing in the cold air. It's the moment that turns strangers into family. So, friends, before we start the full story, let us know in the comments, what city and country are you watching from? We love seeing where our audience is from all around the world. If you enjoy stories of courage, teamwork, and finding your own strength, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. We wish you all the best in whatever journey you're facing. May you always find the family that lifts you higher. Now, let's begin Riley's unforgettable story at Camp Rockford. Riley Morgan stepped off the old blue bus that rattled down the gravel drive into Camp Rockford, Liberty County, her boots scraping against the worn asphalt as the morning chill crept under her second-hand jacket. The American flag rippled above the main gate, the emblem of the base painted in proud navy and gold across the guardhouse wall, but Riley looked almost out of place, just another quiet girl with a faded canvas backpack and thrift store jeans patched at the knee. Around her, new recruits clustered in nervous knots, some snapping selfies in the pale sunlight, others sizing up the competition with surreptitious glances. Brandon Keller strolled past, athletic, golden-haired, and grinning in a crisp training uniform, while Savannah Brooks, blonde ponytails swinging, manicure immaculate, broadcast her arrival to her online followers, already planning hashtags. Riley kept her eyes on the ground, every motion careful, contained, as if she were trying to take up less space than she actually did. Staff Sergeant Marcus Doyle barked orders from the front steps, his voice slicing through the din, "Line up, let's move, show me you can stand like soldiers." His stare swept over the crowd, pausing on Riley just a second longer than the others. Tyler Dawson, hulking and broad-shouldered, bumped fists with a few athletic guys near the front. Harper Quinn, with her red hair pinned back and freckles bright in the sunlight, looked around with a quiet, farm-bred calm. Ethan Miller, the scrawny one in baggy fatigues, clutched a notebook and kept glancing at the nearest exit, like he might bolt. Jacob Reed fumbled with the zipper on his duffel, sweat darkening the back of his borrowed shirt. The reception center loomed ahead, wooden benches under the eaves, clouds of steam rising from discarded coffee cups, the whole place alive with energy that felt somewhere between hope and dread. Riley breathed in the sharp air and filed in at the end of the line. She listened to Brandon cracking jokes about real men's coffee and Savannah's stream of influencer chatter, while Sergeant Doyle walked the line, marking names on his clipboard with thick, work-roughened fingers. Keller, Brandon. Age 23. Leadership potential, he muttered, eyeing Brandon's self-assured grin. Brooks, Savannah. Social media, huh? Doyle's gaze lingered on Riley. Morgan, Riley. Age 22. No background listed. Riley met his stare with a level calm, eyes dark, face unreadable. Yes, Sergeant, she replied, voice steady but soft. Doyle scribbled a note, then moved on, but there was something different about the way he looked at her, like he was cataloging a mystery. Inside, the recruits were ushered into a plain hall lined with wooden benches and plastic stools, the air thick with the smell of instant coffee and the nervous tension of 30 strangers on the edge of something life-changing. For Riley, it all felt both entirely new and strangely familiar. She kept her head down, watching the others form alliances, scanning the room for a place to sit where no one would ask questions. As the overhead lights buzzed, and the steam from coffee curled around faces that were a mix of excitement and anxiety, Riley blended in, almost invisible. But even on this first day, a few people noticed the way she moved, economical, precise, every action purposeful. Harper offered her a small, cautious smile, while Brandon shot her a speculative look, already clocking potential rivals. And as the sun crept higher, gilding the edge of the flag and the weathered walls, the first day at Camp Rockford began to settle in. Riley pulled her faded backpack closer, and wondered, not for the first time, if this was really where she belonged, or if the secrets she carried would ever let her truly be one of them. The reception hall was buzzing as Sergeant Marcus Doyle herded everyone inside, his sharp commands echoing off the old wooden beams overhead. Recruits shuffled onto the long wooden benches and plastic stools, the air thick with a combination of nervous sweat and instant coffee, every surface gleaming with the morning's condensation. Brandon Keller lounged near the front, his broad shoulders draped in his brand-new tactical jacket, already at ease like he'd been born for this. Savannah Brooks, her glossy blonde hair bouncing as she moved, filmed a quick video for her followers, her voice bright and practiced, even as her eyes darted nervously at the stern faces around her. Harper Quinn found a spot on the edge of the bench, freckled hands folded, observing the others with a kind of patient curiosity that only people raised on the rhythm of small-town life seemed to possess. Tyler Dawson arrived late, squeezing in with a good-natured nod, dwarfing the smaller recruits beside him. Ethan Miller, gripping his battered notebook, perched at the very end of a plastic stool, feet barely touching the floor, biting his lips so hard it looked painful. Jacob Reed, his broad, calloused hands trembling ever so slightly, tried to organize his gear on the floor at his feet, eyes wide as he took in the chaos around him. Sergeant Doyle strode to the front, his face etched with lines of authority and exhaustion, eyes a sharp blue that missed nothing. "Welcome to Camp Rockford," he began, his voice booming over the noise. "You're not in high school, not in college, and not on your mama's couch anymore. This is the United States Army. From now on, you will address every instructor as sergeant or ma'am. You will follow orders without question. Out there," he jabbed a finger toward the windows, "where the American flag snapped in the breeze, you will either become soldiers, or you'll break trying." As he spoke, the reality of their new world settled over the recruits. Some straightened their backs, others shrank into their jackets. Savannah slid her phone into her pocket, her smile fading as the magnitude of what lay ahead became real. Brandon only grinned wider, flashing a wink at anyone who looked nervous, while Tyler cracked his knuckles, eager for whatever challenge was next. Riley stayed silent, her gaze fixed on a knot in the wood of the bench, but her posture perfect, hands steady, face unreadable. After roll call, the recruits were sent through a whirlwind of intake stations, medical checks under harsh fluorescent lights, stacks of paperwork filled out with shaking hands, uniforms handed out by a gruff quartermaster named Gibbs, who sized up each person with a glance and an offhand comment, "You look like you'll last, Keller. Brooks, don't ruin that shirt with makeup. Morgan, try not to get lost." When Riley's turn came, Gibbs tossed her a uniform that was a size too big and a pair of worn boots, mismatched laces dangling. She accepted them with a quiet "Thank you, sir," drawing a grunt from the old man. In the fitting room, Surrounded by metal lockers and mirrors smudged with fingerprints, Riley changed into the shapeless uniform, tucking her hair beneath her cap, her own reflection almost unrecognizable. Savannah, just a few lockers down, struggled with her shirt collar, lips pressed together in frustration, while Harper offered to help, her voice soft and unhurried. Brandon and Tyler compared their new boots, joking about blisters and breaking them in on the first day, while Ethan kept his eyes on the floor, moving as quickly as he could without drawing attention. They assembled again in the main hall for orientation, the seats now arranged in neat rows facing a podium where Commandant Rachel Whitaker stood, statuesque in her formal uniform, every ribbon and medal gleaming under the lights. Her eyes swept over the recruits with a force that silenced even Brandon. "From today forward," she declared, "you are soldiers in training. You will face challenges that will strip away everything you thought you knew about yourselves." She paused, voice steady. "Some of you will rise. Some of you will fall. But each of you will learn what it truly means to serve, together." In that moment, Riley felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. Maybe here, hidden in the crowd, she could finally prove something to herself, or at least, disappear into the ranks long enough for the past to loosen its grip. The sunlight cut through the window, lighting up a swirl of dust and steam rising from a row of forgotten coffee cups. For a moment, everything stood still. Then the spell broke, orders were shouted, feet stamped, and the real work of becoming a soldier began. The recruits spilled out of the main hall into the cool air outside, the light harsher now, shadows long across the worn concrete paths of Camp Rockford. Riley moved with the flow, hugging her oversized uniform tighter as Commandant Rachel Whitaker's words echoed in her ears. Sergeant Marcus Doyle directed them toward the barracks, barking, "Pick up the pace. You think the enemy's gonna wait for you to get settled?" The group hurried across the parade ground, boots thudding in uneven sync, each step pulling them further from the lives they'd left behind. The barracks loomed, a long, low building with peeling paint and a line of battered duffel bags already stacked outside the door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood, metal bunks, and nervous anticipation. Beds were assigned with no ceremony. Riley landed a lower bunk in the far corner, the springs creaking beneath her as she set down her things. Across from her, Harper Quinn was methodically folding her civilian clothes, arranging her space with a sense of calm Riley envied. Nearby, Savannah Brooks struggled to shove her designer luggage under the bunk, huffing in frustration as Tyler Dawson offered a lopsided grin and flexed his arms as if daring anyone to challenge him for space. Brandon Keller snagged a top bunk, swinging himself up with practiced ease, while Ethan Miller found himself squeezed between two much larger guys, his notebook clutched tightly to his chest like a lifeline. Jacob Reed ended up near the door, visibly relieved for quick access to fresh air if he needed it. Evening came fast as the recruits tried to adjust, some calling home on battered cell phones, others exchanging stories or sitting in tense silence. Riley kept her head down, unpacking the few items she'd brought, an extra shirt, some toiletries, and a faded photograph she quickly slipped into her locker before anyone could notice. The chatter faded as Staff Sergeant Doyle made his rounds, checking each bunk with sharp eyes, pointing out shoes out of line, blankets not tight enough, lockers left open. "This isn't summer camp," he reminded them, his voice gravelly but not unkind. As lights out approached, the room became a patchwork of whispered voices and restless bodies. Savannah whispered into her phone beneath the covers, cheeks aglow with screen light. Brandon, propped up on one elbow, told stories about wild parties in college football, drawing laughter from Tyler and a few others. Harper quietly reassured a homesick girl across the aisle, her words too soft to carry. Riley lay still, breathing slow and deep, muscles already sore from a day spent standing at attention, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The first night was a test of its own. The barracks echoed with the small sounds of 30 strangers trying to sleep in a strange place, the shuffling of sheets, the hiss of pipes in the wall, the nervous coughs and sighs that filled the dark. For Riley, sleep came easily, almost as if her body remembered other nights spent in unfamiliar places, the trick of relaxing every muscle while keeping just alert enough to react if something changed. Outside, the bass settled into its nightly rhythm, the distant sound of a generator humming, a security patrol passing by under flickering lights. In the darkness, a sense of vulnerability hovered. Anyone could see she didn't belong, but for now, she was just another shadow on a lower bunk. Somewhere down the row, Ethan whimpered in his sleep. Harper murmured soft words of comfort. Tyler snored like a freight train. And in the hush between midnight and morning, Riley stared up at the slats of the bunk above her, counting heartbeats until reveille. The world she'd known felt a million miles away, replaced by the hard certainty of Camp Rockford and the first real hint of who she'd have to become. At 5 a.m., the silence shattered as the overhead lights flickered on and Sergeant Doyle's voice boomed through the barracks like thunder. Up! Move it! Uniforms on, beds made, outside in 4 minutes, do not test me. Chaos erupted as bodies tumbled from bunks, boots slammed to the floor, and 30 young soldiers tried to make sense of morning in a world stripped of comfort. Riley Morgan's eyes snapped open. She was already half-dressed by the time the rest scrambled, her movements precise, economical, like she'd done this all her life. Across the room, Brandon Keller barked encouragement to the guys in his section. Let's go, it's just a jog in the park. Savannah Brooks fumbled with her ponytail, trying to smooth out the wrinkles in her shirt while texting a frantic message before stashing her phone. Tyler Dawson stretched with a groan, the bunk above him creaking as he tied his boots. Harper Quinn helped Ethan Miller find his missing sock, her steady presence like a bomb in the panic. Minutes later, they poured out onto the parade ground, breaths steaming in the cold air. The sky was just beginning to pale, the American flag a dark silhouette against the rising sun. Sergeant Doyle paced in front of the ragged lines, disappointment etched on his face as he surveyed the chaos, untucked shirts, lopsided caps, shoes half-laced. You call this ready? Pathetic. But you'll learn. His glare lingered a moment on Riley, who stood perfectly in line, uniform tight, boots laced, hair tucked neatly beneath her cap. Some of you figured it out, he grunted. Brandon shot Riley a sidelong look, half impressed, half sizing her up. Nice work, Morgan, he muttered, before straightening to attention as Doyle stalked past. Then came physical training. The recruits stumbled through a gauntlet of exercises, push-ups on the frozen ground, sprints across dew-soaked grass, pull-ups on icy metal bars that bit into their hands. Tyler led the pack with raw strength, while Brandon kept pace through sheer will and competitiveness. Savannah struggled, her arms shaking, but refused to quit even when her form collapsed. Ethan surprised everyone with endurance he didn't know he had. Harper coached the lagging recruits with calm words, and Jacob Reed, though breathless, never once dropped out. Riley moved with silent determination, every repetition perfect, never drawing attention but never falling behind. By the end, sweat and cold had erased the last traces of comfort. Sergeant Doyle's face softened, just a fraction, as he watched the group stagger back toward the mess hall. You survived. Some of you even thrived. Remember this feeling, pain means you're still here. Breakfast in the mess hall was a blur of metal trays, rubbery eggs, burnt toast, and industrial coffee that scalded the tongue. The noise level climbed as recruits swapped stories of the morning's chaos. Brandon claimed the end of a long wooden table, gathering a crowd with his brash charm, cracking jokes about military gourmet and flexing his bruised arms for laughs. Tyler showed off a torn shirt sleeve, proudly recounting how he'd outpaced everyone on the sprints. Savannah found a corner with a few other girls, applying chapstick with trembling hands and texting under the table. Ethan and Harper sat together, sharing quiet smiles over their shared survival. Jacob picked at his food in silence, relief and pride mixing on his face. Riley, always on the fringe, ate methodically at the edge of the table, eyes drifting over the room as she memorized faces and alliances forming all around her. It was during breakfast that whispers began to circulate about Riley, how she'd been ready first, how she never seemed winded, how her uniform was the only one that didn't look borrowed from someone twice her size. Brandon leaned over to Tyler. "You see her? Morgan doesn't miss a beat. What's her story?" Tyler just shrugged. "Maybe she's done this before." Savannah, overhearing, frowned, feeling both threatened and intrigued. The pecking order had begun to shift, and Riley was the silent center of gravity. By the time trays clattered into the bin and Sergeant Doyle called for order, the recruits knew the honeymoon was over. Ahead of them waited the real test: classroom drills, weapons issue, and the first taste of military discipline that would stretch them to their limits. But even as nerves churned and doubts festered, Riley stood, squared her shoulders, and marched forward, determined not to let anyone, least of all herself, see her falter. The day unspooled into a punishing rhythm, a gauntlet of new rituals and old anxieties. After breakfast, the recruits filed into a cinderblock classroom lined with battered wooden desks and harsh fluorescent lights. Captain Linda Porter stood at the front, sharp-eyed and unsmiling, her crisp uniform adorned with medals that seemed to absorb the weak daylight. She launched into a rapid-fire lesson on military history, slamming home the principles of honor, teamwork, and sacrifice. Her voice, though not loud, carried the kind of authority that silenced side conversations and left even Brandon Keller, so quick with jokes before, scribbling frantic notes. Savannah Brooks sat upright, struggling to hide her panic as she realized likes and follows meant nothing here. Harper Quinn's freckles stood out against her flushed skin as she listened, rapt, while Ethan Miller's notebook filled with lines and sketches that tried to make sense of the chaos. Next came weapons issue, the armory smelling of oil and old sweat, steel racks lined with M4 carbines. Sergeant Sutta Patricia Evans, a compact woman with piercing gray eyes and forearms like rebar, handed out rifles with the finality of a judge passing sentence. "You don't respect your weapon, it won't respect you," she intoned, handing Riley a rifle that felt both foreign and oddly familiar in her hands. Tyler Dawson grinned, cradling his like a prized trophy. Brandon tested the balance, nodding in approval. Savannah hesitated, her hands trembling as Sergeant Evans showed her how to clear the chamber. "It's just metal and moving parts," Evans said, softer now. "But in the field, it's the only friend you'll have." Riley watched, quietly repeating every step, never missing a detail. Harper noticed, her gaze curious. She wondered, as others did, where Riley had learned to move with such calm. In the afternoon, the recruits were thrown into protocol drills, marching in formation, snapping salutes, reciting regulations until the words blurred in their mouths. Brandon led one line, barking out cadence with that irrepressible charisma, Tyler at his side. Savannah struggled to keep her steps in time, her face flushed with effort and embarrassment, while Ethan tripped over his own boots but picked himself up, determined not to be left behind. Riley kept to the edge, moving with quiet precision, every motion drilled and clean, her eyes straight ahead. Whenever Sergeant Doyle or Sergeant Evans called on her, she delivered, no mistakes, no hesitation. The others started to notice. Harper, ever the observer, tried to catch Riley's eye after one especially sharp turn. "You've done this before?" she whispered. Riley just shook her head, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face. By evening, fatigue clung to the recruits like sweat. The barracks were louder now, alliances shifting, some old insecurities growing sharper. Brandon held court, retelling the day's humiliations and victories with his usual flair. Tyler and Jacob compared bruises. Savannah sat at her bunk, scrolling through old photos, her confidence crumbling. Harper finally cornered Riley as she polished her boots with quiet efficiency. "You don't have to do everything alone," Harper said softly, her tone more invitation than question. Riley paused, looking at Harper for the first time, not through, but at her. For a second, she almost let down her guard. But secrets have a way of burrowing deep. She managed a small smile, then went back to her boots, the shine never quite matching the steel in her eyes. The next morning, exhaustion still clung to the air as a light drizzle pattered on the barracks roof. The recruits shuffled outside into the gray dawn, hoods up and collars high, breath clouding in the cold. Sergeant Marcus Doyle's orders came sharper than ever. Today, tactical drills and team exercises in the field. You want to be soldiers? Prove you can work together, he barked, eyeing each recruit as they lined up by squad. Rain slicked the parade ground, turning gravel to mud. Brandon Keller puffed his chest, eager to impress, rallying his squad with a broad grin and a pat on the back for anyone lagging. Tyler Dawson rolled his shoulders, nodding to the other big guys, ready for anything physical. Savannah Brooks, face drawn but determined, wiped drizzle from her brow as she tried to keep up, while Harper Quinn offered soft encouragement to a shivering Ethan Miller, whose hands shook as he tightened his jacket. Riley Morgan, as always, stood a little apart, quietly watching and weighing each dynamic. The first exercise was a simulated patrol, squads tasked with moving in formation and watching for threats. Sergeant Sutta Patricia Evans watched with folded arms, her sharp eyes missing nothing as the squad staggered through puddles and under dripping trees. Brandon took command, calling signals in a voice that was too loud for stealth, but full of confidence. Tyler covered the rear, boots sinking in the mud, while Savannah squinted into the rain, clutching her rifle as if it might float away. Harper kept the team moving, quietly steering Ethan through the roughest patches. When it was Riley's turn to lead, her commands were soft but precise, hands signaling silently, her eyes scanning every shadow. The squad responded, moving smoother, tighter, more aware. Sergeant Evans gave a single nod, the barest hint of approval. Later, in a break between drills, Riley sat under a makeshift awning, just a sagging tarp stretched over wooden poles. Rain drummed overhead. She took the chance to check her gear, cleaning mud from her rifle and wringing out her damp sleeves. Harper joined her, silent for a moment before saying, "The others trust you." Even Brandon, though he won't admit it. Riley shrugged, a slight smile at the corner of her mouth. "It's just practice," she said, but Harper shook her head. "It's more than that. You don't just know the drills, you make people better." "How?" Before Riley could answer, a commotion broke out near the supply crates. Ethan had dropped his magazine in a puddle, panic flickering across his face as Brandon teased, "Careful, Miller, or you'll drown before lunch." Savannah winced at the laughter, but Tyler nudged Brandon with a warning glare. Riley rose, walked over, and crouched beside Ethan, showing him, without judgment, how to check and clean his equipment. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Slow down. Breathe. Everyone's learning." Ethan nodded, hands steadier, a flush of gratitude on his cheeks. By midday, the rain eased, leaving the ground thick with mud and the recruits shivering but more cohesive. Sergeant Doyle gathered the squads and announced a final exercise, an obstacle course through the trees, walls to scale, ropes to climb, ditches to crawl. Brandon launched himself at the first wall, muscles straining, calling for Tyler's help to boost him up. Savannah hesitated at the rope climb, nerves raw, but Harper and Riley coaxed her forward, promising to catch her if she slipped. Ethan struggled at every turn but never gave up, Jacob Reed hauling him over a log with a grin. When Riley faced the last obstacle, a flooded trench, she moved quickly, cleanly, helping Savannah and Ethan through before pulling herself out with barely a splash. The rest of the squad followed, tired but triumphant, mud-streaked and smiling. Even Brandon, chest heaving, looked at Riley with new respect. "Not bad, Morgan," he said, offering a muddy handshake. For the first time, Riley accepted, her grip firm. That night in the barracks, spirits ran high. Laughter echoed between the bunks as stories were retold, the morning's tension giving way to the camaraderie of shared struggle. Riley still sat at the edge, polishing her boots, but when Harper handed her a cup of steaming cocoa, she didn't refuse. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, surrounded by the sounds of newfound belonging, Riley Morgan almost let herself believe she could stay. But as dawn crept over Camp Rockford, a new challenge loomed, one that would test not just their bodies, but the trust and loyalty that had started to grow between them. The morning began with a surprise inspection. Sergeant Marcus Doyle burst into the barracks, his boots pounding the floor, barking, "On your feet." "Barracks check. Let's see who thinks they can hide behind a clean floor and a shiny boot." The recruits scrambled, snapping to attention by their bunks. Riley stood motionless, the faintest hint of nerves flickering in her eyes. Brandon Keller, usually unshakable, hurried to tuck a stray sock away. Savannah Brooks' heart raced as she tried to smooth her rumpled sheet, cheeks flushed pink. Tyler Dawson flashed a crooked grin at Ethan Miller, who was too rattled to return it, his hands trembling on the rail of his bunk. Harper Quinn glanced at Riley, offering the silent reassurance of her calm presence. Sergeant Doyle and Sergeant Sutta Patricia Evans moved methodically down the rows, inspecting every corner and locker. Evans stopped in front of Savannah's bunk, frowning at a smudge on the metal frame. "You want to be trusted with a rifle but can't even keep your bunk in order?" she snapped. Savannah's eyes glistened with frustration, but she swallowed her protest, nodding in silence. Doyle, meanwhile, paused at Riley's corner. Her bed was perfect, locker squared away, boots gleaming, not a detail out of place. "Morgan," he said, his tone softer but still edged, "where'd you learn this?" Riley just held his gaze, answering simply, "I pay attention, Sergeant." He moved on, but the question hung in the air like fog. After inspection, the recruits were split into teams for an advanced field simulation, a capture-the-flag exercise in the woods beyond the parade ground. The squads huddled around battered wooden benches beneath the trees, plotting strategy. Brandon naturally tried to take charge, mapping out an aggressive plan, while Tyler was all for brute force. Savannah listened, chewing her lip, glancing at Riley for reassurance. Harper, in her quiet way, suggested more patience and stealth. Riley, pressed by the others to lead, finally spoke up, her voice low but steady, "We win together, or we lose together. Everybody has a job. Savannah, you're our eyes. Ethan, you relay messages. Tyler, cover the flank. Brandon, back me up." She looked each one in the eye. For a moment, no one argued. The game unfolded in a blur of adrenaline and tension, bodies ducking through wet leaves, breaths steaming in the cold, the snap of branches underfoot. Riley's strategy, blend in, stay low, move as a unit, paid off. Savannah, normally overlooked, spotted an ambush and warned the squad just in time. Ethan, despite his nerves, kept communications tight. Tyler's strength held the line when they were nearly overrun. Brandon, surprised at first to take orders from Riley, found himself listening, and, to his own shock, respecting her call. In the end, their squad claimed the flag, muddy and grinning, breathless with the thrill of victory. As Sergeant Evans blew the whistle, there was pride in her nod. "That's teamwork. That's what wins wars." For Riley, the praise was almost overwhelming. For once, she let herself share the smile, standing in the cold sunlight among her friends, and, for the briefest instant, she belonged. But the mood shifted that evening as rumors began to ripple through the barracks. Someone had noticed Riley's uncanny skill, the way she never missed a step, never fumbled a command, and always seemed to know exactly what to do before the sergeants even spoke. Brandon Keller, pride still fresh from the morning's victory, found himself at the center of whispered debates. "How does she do it?" someone asked. "She's not just good, she's perfect." Savannah Brooks, huddled on her bunk, tried to wave it off, but the unease was contagious. Even Tyler Dawson, who rarely doubted anyone's intentions, began to wonder. Harper Quinn, ever loyal, dismissed the talk, defending Riley's work ethic and heart. But the energy had changed, suspicion and admiration twisted together in the barracks air. The next day brought hand-to-hand combat drills, close quarters, no room for hiding. Staff Sergeant Marcus Doyle and Sergeant Sutta Patricia Evans had set up thick mats in the training hall, the fluorescent lights bright and unforgiving. "Combat is where you find out what you're really made of," Doyle announced, his voice echoing. "Pair off. Prove you belong." Tyler grinned, flexing his broad shoulders, eager to test his strength. Brandon sized up the competition, his smile all challenge and bravado. Savannah bit her lip, nervous, while Ethan Miller tried to melt into the background. Harper partnered with Savannah, whispering encouragement. Riley waited quietly at the edge until, inevitably, Sergeant Evans paired her with Cole Murphy, a solid, older recruit with a reputation for toughness. Cole charged in, confident and aggressive, but Riley moved with a quiet, practiced grace. She slipped from his grip, countered a hold, and in less than 20 seconds, she had him pinned, her breathing calm and even. The room fell silent. Tyler's eyes went wide, Brandon's competitive smirk faded, Savannah's mouth hung open. Sergeant Evans knelt down, looking Riley in the eye. "Where did you learn that?" Riley just replied, "Self-defense classes, Sergeant." Evans held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded, but the tension in the room thickened. As the drills continued, every eye tracked Riley, curiosity sharpening into something more pointed. When the session ended, even Harper hesitated, sensing Riley's walls going up again. That night, Brandon confronted Riley near the lockers. "You don't have to keep secrets, you know. We're supposed to be a team." His voice was softer than usual, uncertainty fighting with old pride. Riley looked at him, exhaustion and sadness in her eyes. "It's not about trust, Brandon. It's just who I am." He nodded, stepping back, but the air between them was heavier than before. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the barracks, a handful of recruits started to speculate, was Riley some kind of plant, an undercover evaluator, or worse, someone sent to make the rest of them fail? The suspicion spread, invisible but suffocating, and by morning, the fragile unity Riley had helped build felt suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. The change was subtle at first, a glance that lingered a little too long, whispered conversations that stopped as Riley entered the room, hands pulling closer together over breakfast trays. The barracks felt colder, harder. Even Harper Quinn, ever the warmest presence, seemed cautious, her concern fighting with her own doubts. Brandon Keller kept his distance, arms crossed, staring at Riley with an intensity that mixed admiration with fear. Savannah Brooks avoided eye contact, sinking into the shell of her social media past, scrolling endlessly through photos of a world she wasn't sure she belonged to anymore. Tyler Dawson, usually the heartbeat of their squad, filled the silence with too loud jokes, his laughter fraying at the edges. That afternoon, the tension broke in the worst possible way. During an advanced weapons drill, Sergeant Sutta Patricia Evans assigned Riley to demonstrate a complex rifle assembly in front of the class. Her movements were flawless, too flawless. As she completed the sequence with practiced ease, a low murmur ran through the recruits. Brandon's voice, usually friendly, cut the silence. "Who taught you that, Morgan?" "Because no rookie knows that stuff." Ethan Miller looked away, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Harper tried to interject, "Come on, everyone's got a talent," but the words felt thin. Sergeant Evans's eyes narrowed. "Is there something you want to share, Private Morgan?" Riley's jaw set. "No, Sergeant. Just practice." The room simmered with distrust. When Evans moved on, Savannah leaned over, voice barely a whisper, "If you're hiding something, it's gonna come out. People here want to trust you, Riley." Riley didn't answer. Her hands, steady as ever, began to shake once they were out of sight. As night fell, the barracks became a battlefield of suspicion. Brandon gathered a few allies at the far end of the room. "I'm just saying, it's not fair. If she's a plant, or a ringer, we all pay for it." Tyler listened, brow furrowed, torn between loyalty and growing unease. Harper tried to hold the squad together, inviting Riley to sit with her and Ethan for cards, but the gesture felt awkward, the distance too wide. Jacob Reed offered a hesitant, "Don't let him get to you, Riley," but even he seemed uncertain. Riley spent the evening alone on her bunk, polishing her boots with methodical care, the faded photograph of her father hidden inside her locker, his legacy burning a hole in her chest. The breaking point came at midnight, when Brandon finally confronted Riley in front of everyone. "You owe us the truth. Are you even supposed to be here?" For a long moment, Riley said nothing. She looked from face to face, seeing the fear and disappointment in their eyes, people she'd come to respect, maybe even care about. The barracks fell silent. "I don't owe you anything," she whispered, her voice raw but steady. "But I wanted to be one of you. I wanted to belong." The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the bass outside. For the first time, Riley felt the full weight of isolation, the pain of being both seen and utterly alone. The silence lingered long after Brandon's accusation, casting a shadow across the entire barracks that made the air feel heavy and stale. Sleep did not come easy that night. Riley stared at the metal frame above her, listening to the restless shifting and quiet sighs of 30 recruits, each one wrestling with their own doubts. When morning finally arrived, it brought no relief. The sky outside was iron gray, the promise of another cold, grueling day. Yet something had shifted in the group. Sergeant Marcus Doyle's voice sounded sharper as he ordered everyone to muster outside, but even he seemed to sense the tension radiating from his recruits. Breakfast was a silent affair, spoons clinking against metal trays, no one daring to break the fragile truce that now existed. The day's training was brutal, a punishing series of live-fire drills and advanced field maneuvers. As the squad slogged through mud and freezing wind, their earlier camaraderie seemed irreparably fractured. Brandon Keller pushed his team harder than ever, barking commands with an edge that bordered on anger. Tyler Dawson followed his lead, jaw set, eyes cold. Savannah Brooks, who once brought a touch of brightness to every group, now moved quietly at the edges, careful not to draw attention. Harper Quinn tried to hold her squad together, encouraging Ethan Miller and Jacob Reed, but it was clear the glue was wearing thin. And Riley, for all her skill, was left to work alone. When her turn came to lead a navigation exercise through the woods, her instructions were clipped and efficient. She got her team to the checkpoint faster than any other, but not a single word of praise was offered in return. After hours of drills, the squad returned to the barracks, cold and soaked to the bone. Sergeant Sutta Patricia Evans called Riley aside. The two stood near a steaming radiator, the heat barely taking the edge off the day's chill. Evans' voice was low but firm. "Whatever your background, Morgan, you're here now. These people may never trust you again. That's not your fault. But what you do next, that is." Riley listened, her face unreadable, then nodded once. She felt exposed, not just for what she was, but for what she'd tried so hard to hide. As Evans walked away, Riley pulled the faded photo from her locker and stared at it, her father's proud face beside her younger self, both in uniform, both smiling in a way she hadn't allowed herself to in months. It hurt to look at, but she did anyway. As evening fell, a soft knock came at Riley's bunk. Harper stood there, hands folded, worry and hope mingling on her freckled face. "I don't care where you learned all this," she said quietly. I just know I wouldn't have made it this far without you. Riley's eyes shone with gratitude and pain. Behind Harper, Savannah lingered, biting her lip. I'm sorry, Savannah stammered. We just want to know you're really with us. Slowly, the wall of suspicion began to crack. Tyler approached next, awkward but sincere. Nobody here's perfect. Least of all me. Brandon hovered at the edge, uncertain, but for the first time, there was a softness to his stance. The others watched, unsure, but the atmosphere in the barracks was lighter than it had been in days. As the heater clicked and hummed, the recruits gathered around Riley's bunk, sharing awkward smiles and quietly rekindling the fragile bonds that training, and the truth, had nearly broken. That night felt different. Instead of the oppressive silence of suspicion, there was a cautious hope. The next morning, Riley woke before reveille, listening to the slow, even breathing of her squad mates. She allowed herself a rare moment of contentment before swinging her feet to the cold floor, ready for whatever came next. The weather had turned, a weak sun cut through the clouds, glinting off the frost on the parade ground. Sergeant Marcus Doyle announced that the day's schedule would be the most grueling yet, a comprehensive team challenge meant to push every recruit to their limit. The squad assembled outside, breath steaming, the bite of winter air met with a new sense of unity. Brandon Keller clapped Riley on the back, Tyler Dawson offered her a nod, Savannah Brooks squeezed her hand with a grateful smile, Harper Quinn tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and stood by her side, and even Ethan Miller looked at her with open admiration. The challenge was relentless, an all-day test combining every skill they had learned. They ran field maneuvers across frozen mud, navigated obstacle courses blindfolded, treated staged casualties in a freezing wind, and coordinated under a simulated communications blackout. It was chaos, but this time, they faced it together. Riley, finally unburdened, guided the team not from the front, but from within, passing tips, steadying nerves, and stepping back when others needed to lead. Brandon's booming voice inspired those lagging behind. Tyler used his strength to lift and carry, but followed Riley's cues. Savannah, once so timid, took charge in the medical exercise, her hands sure and quick. Harper managed the radio, keeping everyone calm, while Ethan, no longer shrinking into the background, volunteered to run point during the hardest navigation stretch. When exhaustion threatened to tear them apart, it was Riley who pulled them together. You know the drill, she said, her voice strong. We finish as one. No exceptions. And so they did. The final sprint brought them over the line together, arms linked, faces flushed with pride and cold. Sergeant Doyle, rarely one for praise, simply nodded. That, he said, was the work of soldiers. The words settled over the group like a benediction. Back at the barracks that night, the team celebrated with steaming mugs of cocoa, crowded around the old radiator. There was laughter, real, ringing laughter, stories of near disasters and hard-won victories, the bonds now forged by sweat, truth, and forgiveness. Riley listened, not from the outside but at the center, her presence a comfort, her story no longer a secret but a source of strength. Savannah snapped a photo, capturing the moment, the steam rising from mugs, the exhaustion and joy on every face, Riley's smile, real, wide, and finally at peace. The photo would become a keepsake, tucked into lockers and sent home in letters, a symbol of what they had survived together. But with the final week came both anticipation and uncertainty. Orders changed. The recruits were to prepare for a culminating field evaluation, a 72-hour simulation that would combine every skill, every lesson, every ounce of resilience they had built. The night before deployment, Commandant Rachel Whitaker gathered them in the briefing hall, her presence as steadying as the American flag billowing outside. You will be pushed harder than you've ever been, she told them. You're ready, all of you. Trust your training. Trust each other. And don't forget, leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about lifting the people next to you, no matter what. Riley caught Brandon's eye across the room and nodded, both remembering how much had changed. The exercise began at dawn. The squad shouldered heavy packs and marched into the wilderness surrounding Camp Rockford, frost crunching under their boots. They moved as one unit: Riley, Brandon, Tyler, Savannah, Harper, Ethan, Jacob, and the others, navigating dense woods and icy rivers, negotiating with civilian actors, defending their position from simulated attacks, and rescuing wounded teammates under fire. Fatigue set in quickly, but this time, nobody was left behind. Savannah's keen eyes caught movement in the trees and warned the squad of an ambush. Brandon improvised a shield with a fallen branch, Tyler carried an exhausted Ethan across a creek, and Harper relayed updates on the radio with her calm, clear voice. Riley led quietly, never dominating, always listening, her confidence now rooted in the team rather than her own secrecy. Even the instructors, observing from afar, saw something rare in the way the group moved: not just discipline, but loyalty. Not just skill, but genuine care. The nights were hardest. On the second evening, as cold seeped into their bones, the squad huddled around a small campfire, wrapped in ponchos and sharing bites of energy bars. In the flickering light, faces were etched with weariness, but also the pride of knowing how far they'd come. Tyler told a story from home, making the group laugh. Ethan, voice small but strong, thanked everyone for not giving up on him. Harper passed around her last bit of chocolate, and Savannah snapped another picture, this time, with everyone crammed close, Riley at the center, her arm around Harper and a real smile on her lips. In the darkness beyond the fire, Brandon said quietly, "We wouldn't have made it here without you, Morgan." Riley just shook her head. "We wouldn't have made it without each other." The team fell silent, letting that truth settle, the fire's warmth a reminder that sometimes, family is chosen. When the final day of the evaluation dawned, the recruits were bone-tired but unbreakable, forged by adversity into something more than they'd ever expected. The last leg was the hardest, a forced march before sunrise through biting wind, then a simulated rescue mission under timed pressure, every sense straining, every muscle screaming. Riley Morgan led not with orders but with faith in her team, watching Brandon Keller push through a twisted ankle, Tyler Dawson steady Ethan Miller when his strength flagged, and Savannah Brooks, once the uncertain outsider, spotting the route that saved them precious minutes. Harper Quinn checked on everyone, her calm like a beacon in the cold. They finished not as individuals but as one, bursting out of the woods and onto the parade ground with mud on their faces and pride in their hearts. The instructors were waiting, Commandant Rachel Whitaker at the front, her eyes shining with a pride she rarely showed. "You've done what few can," she told them. "Not just endured, but become better together. That's what this uniform means." Graduation was held at sunset, the sky over Camp Rockford painted in gold and crimson. The recruits stood at attention, rows of polished boots and pressed uniforms, faces alive with accomplishment and relief. Family members gathered at the edge of the field, waving flags and snapping photos, but for many, including Riley, this group was the only family that truly mattered now. Commandant Whitaker presented each recruit with their insignia, shaking hands with a rare, genuine smile. Brandon stood tall beside Riley, still limping but grinning wider than ever. Tyler and Jacob exchanged a bear hug. Savannah wiped away happy tears as Harper squeezed her shoulder. Ethan received his insignia with trembling hands, eyes shining with disbelief. When Whitaker handed Riley her patch, she paused, her voice low enough for only Riley to hear, "You proved what real leadership is." As the ceremony ended and the crowd surged forward, the squad came together for one last group photo. Harper insisted Riley take the center, and for once, Riley didn't protest. The camera clicked, a dozen faces, all changed by struggle, all defined now by connection. In the glow of the setting sun, they lingered on the field, swapping stories and promises to keep in touch. Savannah pressed the photo into Riley's hand. "For the next time you forget what you're capable of." Riley looked around at her friends, the warmth in her chest stronger than any medal or promotion. As twilight deepened, the group drifted apart, some to waiting cars, some to the barracks for one last night. Riley stood at the edge of the field, breathing in the cold, clean air, her heart finally quiet. She knew that whatever the future held, new assignments, distant wars, challenges no one could predict, she would carry this family with her, always. In the story of her life, Camp Rockford was not an ending, but a beginning. Dear friends, our story has come to an end. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. We hope Riley's journey at Camp Rockford inspired you and reminded us all of the strength found in unity, perseverance, and believing in yourself even when no one else does. Before we say goodbye, if you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, so you never miss our latest and most inspiring stories. Thank you for being with us today. See you in the next adventure.